and welcome to your TV library. In this episode, we're going to be discovering the works of the botanical artist Sibylla Merian. Merian was born on the 2nd of April 1647 and she died on the 13th of January 1717. Although not the first, Sibylla Merian was an observer of the metamorphosis of insects and the specific plants that hosted insects. Sibylla's observations led her to create extremely high quality and accurate illustrations. Outstandingly, she created these fine illustrations at the early age of 13. And just 19 years later, the first volume of her work was published, entitled The Caterpillar's Wonderful Transformation and Curious Flower Nutrition, in which she described the principles of metamorphosis and illustrated it by a number of drawings. Her beginnings were humble. Her stepfather, John Marrell, earned a reasonable living from the production of pictures for science books. And as life was still quite tough for a girl in 1660, her achievements deserve recognition. But let's go back in time, when Merian first started observing and drawing silkworms, caterpillars and butterflies at the age of 13. Merian loved to draw. Much to her mother's disapproval, she loved to spend hours and hours on her drawings. However, her stepfather, who was a painter himself, praised her pictures. We can imagine the scenario. "This is absolutely brilliant! You might be able to make a living through these drawings one day." "Don't encourage her," nagged her mother. There, my little cabbage. Only a couple of weeks ago, she drew a picture of a flower that's so precise, so stunning and beautiful that I'm going to use it in one of my picture science books. You know, it's so good that I think I'm going to reward her with a visit to the silk farm." "You don't half spoil her," she moaned. Merian overheard the conversation and let out an enormous shriek. "Oh, I'm so excited! I will go to a real silk farm and see beautiful little creatures that are responsible for making something as fine as silk. Something so refined and soft and positively exquisite." It was early morning and everyone in her house was still sleeping. But she, alas, could not. She listened as the rain slowed down to a stop, then silence. "It stopped raining. Now when my stepfather will wake up, he'll have to take me to the silk farm as he promised." Slowly it became lighter and lighter, and she could already hear the first carriages rumble down the streets. Sybil watched her mother get up and light the petrol lamp that gave a warm glow to her face as she lit the fire in the hearth. Sybil got up quickly, got dressed, and she waited impatiently for her father to come down for breakfast. "Father, it stopped raining. Will we visit the silk farm today as you promised?" Her mother interrupted. "First of all, you'll say good morning, young lady." But Jacob replied warmly, "Come on, leave her alone. I understand her, and it really is a pity it's been raining all of these days. Yes, my little pumpkin, we will leave right after breakfast." 3 hours later, they stood in front of a big wall with some trees behind it. Jacob Marrell knocked at the gate, and shortly afterwards, someone opened it. "Right," the old man behind the gate said. "Jacob, you wanted to come along with your daughter. Is that her?" Sybil stepped forward and curtsied. "Good day, sir. My name is Sybil, and I wanted to see the silkworms, please." "Well then, come in," the man said and gave way. 2 hours later, Sybil was still enthusiastic. She had seen the silkworms, how they pulpated, and how the silk threads were pulled out of the cocoons which they spun. But at the same time, she was annoyed with herself because she'd forgotten her drawing book at home. And she really would have loved to have drawn the silkworms. Finally, she asked if she might be allowed to take one of the silkworms home in order to draw it. But the old man shook his head and said, "No, this is out of the question. I guess you want to start your own silkworm factory. You want to breed them, don't you?" Sibyl shook her head and she said, "No, I would only like to draw the silkworms. They move so slowly and they just look so pretty. I'd just love to try it." The old man first chuckled and then coughed. Draw? Draw my silkworms? Nobody's ever asked to do this before." Sibyl was disappointed by his reaction, but then her father said, "You know, she really is a good drawer, and if she continues this way, she would have reached way past my level in a couple of years." Sibyl felt proud, and then the old man rose from the table and said, "Well then, wait a minute." He left the room, and her stepfather winked at Sibyl. Time passed, but then he returned and held a little box in his hand. "Here you have some silkworms, but take good care of them. You mind you watch them, love." Sibyl was very happy. She took the box in her hands and she carefully opened it up. In the box there were some twigs from the trees that grew in the garden. She carefully lifted one of the twigs, and there, on the twig, a little silkworm was crawling on it. She smiled, but the elder man said, "Now listen, these silkworms can only eat the leaves from these trees that grow in my garden. You won't be able to keep them for very long unless you return every third day to collect some new leaves." Sibyl nodded, and she agreed that she would most definitely do that. The entire way home, she carefully carried the box of silkworms. But when she finally reached her home, a new problem arose. Her mother would not let her bring the silkworms into the house. "You can't bring those filthy little bugs into my house. Get them out at once." "But mother, these beautiful creatures are what creates silk." "Oh, don't be so absurd. Those ugly little beggars create something so beautiful. I don't believe you." Her father stepped forward and whispered in her ear. "You could always keep them in the attic. It would do no harm," he whispered. "I heard that. I give in with you two. Don't listen to me then, just do as you please as always." Every moment Sibyl could, she went into the attic to observe and draw her silkworms. She watched the insects move in their box and eat the leaves. And then their skin broke and a new caterpillar emerged from the remains and kept on eating. Sibyl was more and more fascinated by the creatures and tried to understand them better through her observations. At the same time, she tried to draw a really good picture of the silkworm, which wasn't exactly easy as they moved very slowly. So she started to draw the strange leaves on the branches that the silkworms inhabited. And then one day, the silkworms started to spin themselves into a cocoon. The elder man had predicted that already, and she had collected the leaves just a couple of days earlier. But she had hoped to be able to keep on drawing and observing the insects, so she returned to the farm and knocked on the gate once again. The old man opened up some time later, and Sibyl said, "Good day. Today I will probably be here for the last time because, well, my silkworms have already spun themselves in." The older man nodded and said, "Well, that's how it goes. There's a time and a place for everything." Sibyl took out one of her drawings from under her cape and gave it to the man. "But I came to give you this. It's a picture I drew of your silkworms." The old man glanced at the picture and said, "Gosh, you really are an artist, young lady. You know what? I'll fetch you some new fresh silkworms just for you. How many do you want?" "Oh," Sibyl nodded, and shortly afterwards she ran home looking forward to observing this new box of fresh silkworms. About a week later, Sibyl entered the attic like she did every day and looked at the silkworms. Suddenly, she noticed something unusual with the cocoons that she had set aside. Something moved inside the cocoon. Sibyl squatted and observed them very carefully. She saw how the cocoons seemed to rip from the inside, very similar to when the silkworms were shedding their skins. But that couldn't be real. She kept looking, and finally the cocoon had reached the point where a tiny little creature crawled out. Sibyl held her breath, and the creature emerged completely and crawled out of the little cocoon, and it suddenly spread its wings, and Sibyl realized it was a butterfly. How could this be true? She had seen that a silkworm had spun a cocoon around itself, and now a beautiful butterfly had come out. Sibyl went downstairs to collect her drawing utensils, and then she drew the butterfly that was extremely still until it became too dark to see. The next day she went back up the attic, and now there were 3 butterflies that were flying around, and broken cocoons lay on the floor. It was miraculous. And what is even more miraculous is that her fine drawings still remain today. And that's all we have time for today, folks. We hope you enjoyed the episode.